Welcome to video 2 for this module. Today we'll be talking about Twitter. And Twitter is really about listening, giving, and engaging. And Twitter started in 2006, so it definitely has a lot of staying power. There are over 500 million accounts, and every second on average there are about 6,000 tweets. And that represents about 350,000 tweets per minute. So it's definitely something that's heavily used. Some more stats are about 16% of the United States internet users are on Twitter. And some of the demographics that it appeals to are adults aged 18 to 29, urban residents, and African Americans. And that's risen. In about 2012, there were about 175 million tweets sent from Twitter each day, so you could see how it's growing. The average person follows or is followed by 51 people. On Twitter, you make your own universe, so you start out with 0 followers and 0 users. And what you'll do is you will follow people that are interesting to you, and then you are followed by people who view you to be interesting. And the average user follows or is followed by 51 people. And what's most interesting is a source called AllTwitter estimates that about 56% of customer tweets to companies are currently being ignored. So that's especially critical for companies that are on Twitter or companies in general to really monitor the people that are mentioning you. It's very frustrating for a customer to be ignored, for there to be unanswered questions, and therefore mounting frustration about a product or a service. So if you're serious about your brand and you're serious about defending your brand or making sure that what people are saying about you in a very public way, in a very searchable way, because all tweets are, you're able to find them through a Google search rather than Facebook, which they call a closed garden, because it's not index searchable on something like Google, but Twitter is. So it's always important, if you're a company, to at least see what's going on. There may be times, and there are times, where you'll find that you do or do not want to respond, but at least to be aware of what people are saying about you. And we'll talk about how to monitor in a little bit to see what people are saying about a given topic. But first, let's talk about how to tweet, how you go about doing it. And Twitter is what they call a microblogging platform. In years past, and if I was talking about social media, one of the first things I would talk about were blogs, which are long-form journal entries or posts. And one thing that Twitter really disrupted was this very powerful thing called blogging. It was definitely all the rage when Twitter was founded in 2006, and what people found was that they didn't have to write a large post, a large thought piece. They could really react to something in a short and sweet way. And in that case, you're limited to 140 characters, including spaces, on Twitter. So it was a way to take something that used to be very long and time intensive. It would take 35 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour to write a blog post. But this was allowing you to bring your thoughts to people in a very quick and usually witty way. And like I said before, you're followed by followers who subscribe to your content. So once again, you start out at 0 and you build your own audience. So you're able to see who's very popular, who is influential, and you grow your own audience. So how you talk on Twitter, we'll cover a couple things. What is an @? What is a hashtag? And what is a RT or retweet? So in order to do this, we'll go back to our friend Ellen DeGeneres, who some people have been looking at as a case study throughout this term. She is really, really great at Twitter and kind of owns it. So we'll use her as a case study to talk about Twitter because what she does is so great. So here's one example of an at. So say you were composing a tweet and you wanted to reference people who just so happens are also on Twitter. What you can do is in this case, she was wishing people a happy Canada Day and mentioning two Canadians that are famous, Alanis Morissette and Sarah McLachlan. And so she knew, or the person composing this tweet knew what the handle for Twitter on each of these people was, and referenced them using the at for their username. So that's a way to kind of give them kudos or reference them in how they are on Twitter. Another way that you can use the at is if you want to address somebody. Now, you can see the little period in front in this case. There are two ways to address somebody themselves. So let's say somebody tweeted something and you wanted to respond to them. You would start your tweet with the at sign. You would, if somebody wanted to talk to me specifically, they would say at Brad Levinson, and then they would compose their tweet. Now, what that does is the only people that will see that in their Twitter streams when they log on to Twitter, or if they're using a Twitter service like TweetDeck, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is the only people that would see that if you started with the at symbol would be people who followed myself and the other person who is tweeting at me. So the one way to get around that, because if Ellen in particular is tweeting something, she doesn't necessarily want Ellie Goulding in this case and followers of her to just see that. So what she can do is you break that little algorithm by putting a character in front of it. In most cases, people put a period. And what that means is that will go out to not just the people who are following Ellen and Ellie Goulding, which is going to be a small percentage. It's going to go out to everybody who follows Ellen by doing this. So some brands, I see it a lot, make the mistake of tweeting directly at somebody, starting with the at, and not knowing that it will only go to their followers that also follow whatever entity they're referencing. So that's a trick to make sure that it goes out to all of your followers, is using the period sign. Then there's the hashtag. A hashtag is kind of a keyword or a trend that is going on. So something that you can reference. So perhaps you've heard of Throwback Thursday. Ellen does something called Classic Joke Wednesday. So here what she's done is she's created a joke, or it's a classic joke, and she's added at the end Classic Joke Wednesday. It kind of gives it a theme. And what people can do is they can click on that hashtag and see what other things people are saying about that theme. Another way that this happens is some are running, so Classic Joke Wednesday, Throwback Thursday. It's a weekly thing, or it happens on a regular basis. Another time, usually what will happen is there will be some sort of current event, and people will give it a hashtag. So early in June, the CIA joined Twitter, and Ellen wanted to create some sort of snarky post about that, and she wrote, "In an interesting turn of events, I'm now following the CIA." Note that she's referencing their Twitter handle. Welcome to Twitter, hashtag CIA is on Twitter. Now, if you clicked on CIA is on Twitter, you would see everybody else who is talking about that current event. So it's a way to create a keyword, it's a way to give it a theme, and it's something that's used very often. So another tool that you can use on Twitter is the retweet or the RT. And there are a couple ways to do it, and I'll show those. The first is if somebody mentions you on Twitter and you want it to go out to your audience. So in this case, somebody mentioned The Ellen Show, and Ellen wants to have her audience see this. So she will press the retweet button. And what that will do is then that will syndicate that tweet to the people that follow her. And that's just one way of kind of, it's almost like a forwarded email. You forward it to your friends. So another way to use the retweet is to add something to what somebody has said, kind of a quip or a reaction. In this case, Ellen saw that Courtney Cox tweeted that she is newly engaged, and Ellen wanted to add a joke, so she wrote, "Wonderful, I'll look at my flower girl dress ready." And she then forwarded that to people who follow her with her own added little quip. Now, let's say you wanted to retweet here. Something to keep in mind in this is, let's say Courtney Cox's tweet was 140 characters. When you click the retweet button or you want to add something, you'll notice that you're using additional characters here. So the RT at Courtney Cox actually then counts towards your 140 characters. So what you would need to do is almost whittle down what the person was saying. Now keep this in mind, and I'll talk about this in a second, and how you get around this is, let's say you're a brand and you want to tweet something. If you ever wanted people to retweet it, they would have to shave down something. If you wrote it in 140 characters and they wanted to retweet you, they would have to shave down your tweet a little bit in order to make it fit within the 140 characters. So that's something to keep in mind, and I'll talk about that in a second when you're composing your own tweets. So how do you do that? How do you take the 140 characters and make something out of that? What I would suggest, the first thing you want to do is make concise content. So you really want to synthesize it, reduce your entire message into one short, quick snippet. So how can you really summarize this in 140 characters? Maybe you want to get rid of extraneous words. Maybe you want to make it kind of headline based. Maybe you want to just have one certain aspect of a story, a bit of a teaser. Maybe you can summarize it in just 140 characters, but you want to whittle it down. You want to be careful about the amount of words that you use. Some people will get around it by using the letter U instead of the word Y-O-U, the letter R instead of A-R-E. That is something that some people do, perhaps personally. When you're representing a brand that is a formal organization, you might want to be careful about doing something like that because you are representing the brand, and you would essentially be using slang term there. So you want to see if that represents your brand well, and if you want to abbreviate like that. Some might do that if you're, a hip brand. If you were getting that from something like NBC News, who's reporting, that would be a little, it would be a little weird because they're supposed to be an organization that you respect and trust, and they're using abbreviations like that. So it's something you want to consider the pros and cons of as you're creating concise content. Another thing that you can do is use a link shortening service. So if you have a long URL that you want to add to your tweet, the URLs can be over 140 characters. So there's something called a link shortening service. One particular one is something called Bitly. And what you do is you go to that website, bitly.com or bit.ly, both lead you there, and you paste it in, the URL, and it'll reduce the number of characters to something like 10 characters. What's also great is if you have an account on Bitly and you shorten that link through your account, it'll actually track the number of clicks that you got and received from that tweet and how many people clicked on that link. And another thing that you can do to even limit from 140 characters to less is, as I was talking about in the last slide, what you might want to do is save room for retweets. I usually aim for anywhere from 105 to 120 characters if I need to when I tweet, because, especially from a brand, because if you want to make sure that your message shows up exactly as you want it to without people having to shave off characters to make it fit 140 characters if they're retweeting you and adding more characters because they have to use the RT at and then your brand. If you send it with just 105 to 120 characters, then they don't have to edit it. They call that frictionless sharing, because they aren't pressured to do that, and then your core message, that one that you worked really hard to create, stays intact. So let's talk about following and followers. So what you can see here, going back to our friend Ellen, is kind of the stats of her page. You'll see that she has 9,065 tweets. The number of people that she is following is over 46,000 people. And the number of followers that are following her are almost 30 million. So in this case, Ellen is definitely a celebrity. I'm really surprised, as some of you have mentioned when you were taking a look at Ellen as a case study, is that she is following 46,000 people. These may be people that she views to be influential, and people are probably monitoring this account for her to see the amount of people. But you'll see that there's a lot more followers here than the number of people that she is following, because she is a celebrity. In the world of non-celebrity, usually you want to keep these two fairly even. So say 800 people are following you, you might usually have 800 followers. There are pros and cons to having one too many of one or the other. So say you have, let's say you're Ellen and you had 30 million people who were following you, and you followed 0 people or 1 person. What that goes to show people on Twitter is you don't care what they have to say. What they're saying is not valuable to you. What you're using it is not as an interaction service, as a way to interact with people. You're using it as a broadcasting mechanism. So people might not respond so well to you. It also shows them that their tweets to you are being ignored as well. So what you want to do there is, as Ellen has done here, is follow some people back to show that you are interactive on there. On the other side, let's say you're following 1,000 people and you have 1 person following you back. What that shows people is that what you are tweeting isn't necessarily of value, that people don't want to subscribe to your content, that people don't want to hear what you have to say, and that will put a bad taste in people's mouth, and they won't really tune you in. So a lot of the times you'll want to grow your account slowly at first to kind of have that reciprocity and that evenness, or some level of strategy based on the number of followers that you have and the number of people that you are following. So let's talk about monitoring and responding. So you're on Twitter now, you're writing your own tweets. Hopefully you've gained followers, and hopefully people know that your Twitter handle exists, and now they're talking about you. Or let's say you want to get and talk about a certain topic. There's a website, search.twitter.com, and you can see what's happening at that moment. So in this case, I typed World Cup and I clicked on search, and you get to a page where it talks about it. Everybody that is talking about this topic, it's a little stream. So you can go and you could see, if you see where in the center at the top there's results for World Cup, there's top and then there's all. So what Twitter will do is will divide out the number of by the people who are very influential, so the top, and then all people, just anybody who is talking about it, as a way to do a really thorough search. And as you're on this and as you're looking at this, what you can see below that is new results have come in since I last refreshed the page. So this was just a few seconds after I searched for World Cup. So you can see then that it's a very heavy subject that people are talking about right now, that there's a lot of volume in terms of the number of people that are talking about it. And then if you really want to get professional about it, there are services called TweetDeck or Hootsuite. And what you can do is add columns to this service. So this is a a search that I found through a Google image search. So what you can do is you can add certain keywords and have different columns, and as somebody talks about that specific keyword, it then shows up together in a column, and from there you can retweet, you can reply right through this service. So that is kind of the professional's way of doing it, where you have dedicated columns for dedicated keyword searches, and you can search if anybody's using the @ symbol beforehand, so if they're talking directly at you, if there are certain hashtags and themes that you've picked up on that you want to monitor, you can do all of that here through something like TweetDeck or Hootsuite. So that is the basic overview of Twitter and how you would compose tweets, how you would monitor, and then the usage stats of it. Next up, we'll talk about some of the things that remain, the other social networks that are popular these days. So we'll talk about those in the next video.